Hello everybody, I'm joined today by Paul Couchman, otherwise known as the Regency Cook, and I'm going to be grilling Paul in a light-hearted, chatty fashion, so it's not scary at all about food history. Paul, first of all, why are you called the Regency Cook? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's funny really. I just sort of ended up, as you do, in a Regency kitchen as a volunteer for a place called the Regency Townhouse. And I decided to start cooking there, and through that's kind of how my whole little business has started up. So I do online food courses really from my own kitchen here, but that's really started from a love of historic houses and historic kitchens and the way things are done, and also recipes. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it's a really good way to get into history, especially for people who aren't really that into history. To get into it through the food and then discover the history through the food. I think that's wonderful, and that's kind of what I do for people online. Yeah, in my classes.
I think that's great. I think a kitchen would make a fantastic one-place study, wouldn't it? A real micro study of who came in and out of that kitchen. That'd be really, really fascinating. I've just scrolled out slightly so that people can see your wonderful kitchen.
you got the full idea. Yeah. This is why I do the classes, but we were going to talk about local food, weren't we? And I had a few examples, because I think the one that I just wanted to grab, because I think everyone knows it, because I'm in Sussex, I should say. I'm in East Sussex, and all the stuff around me, we grow our own fruit and veg and stuff, and there's an allotment just over there. But beyond there, we've really got the Sussex countryside and stuff. And also there was something, people probably know them, there's sort of dew ponds. These are ponds where cattle go to drink. So they're sort of basins where water fills up. And this is the idea. So I can see within 10 minutes I can go and look at one. And this Sussex pond pudding, the idea is these are the ponds for the Sussex pond pudding. If you've not heard of the Sussex pond pudding, it's the idea is you've got it's a pudding that originally was done in a cloth. So it's a suet pudding, and inside, according to Jen Grigson at least, there's a lemon that's been cooked inside. But the original recipe doesn't talk about lemon. So the idea is that this Sussex pond pudding, which is really associated with Sussex, it's kind of a bit of a myth, kind of a bit of a fable, that it wasn't really a lemon in it until 1972. So I think that's lovely. I've got the original recipe actually, which is quite rather lovely. And the original recipe comes from 1672. And she talks about the ingredients and about putting it into a buttered cloth, and then dropping it into hot water and steaming it. But she does say that you go inside the pudding, you put butter. So the idea is that when you cut the pudding open, this pond comes out, and that's where it gets its name from. But she also does mention gooseberries, about using green gooseberries. So we think that's maybe the idea of how the lemon came along, that you put something a bit sour. You've got some sweet in there as well, and you've got that lovely combination then of sweet and sour that a lemon does as well. But in the original, we think it's either an apple, actually, she says either an apple or gooseberries.
And presumably that means they were local foods that you could find, through foraging or...
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, apples I've got here. We've got some gooseberries, which isn't very historic, but I've got gooseberries in the freezer. So we picked those early in the year as well. So I've got all the stuff to make it with, yeah.
Excellent. So why do you think food is important in particular to local history?
Well, I think it's really interesting because the way foods become associated with particular places. And I think that I love the theory that with the increase of tourism, especially in the Victorian period, where people were able to go to places, the places themselves decided to make a thing of the food. So people would go to Grasmere for the gingerbread. You got examples of larder cake from Wiltshire, Banbury cakes, all those sort of things pop up because people want to travel, and the hotels and the restaurants and those sort of things that spring up, the tea rooms, they want to cater for these people with local specialities. And so all these sort of things really start coming back, because if you think about it, the Victorian period is when actually people start eating very similar things. You've got mass food, you've got tin food, you've got your biscuits, things like that start developing, and everybody starts eating them. And then people start hankering back for these local things as well. And it goes right through periods, you know, like that. So I've got an example from, it's rather beautiful actually. I can show it. An example from
you a bit again so we can see it.
Yeah. I hold it up. Can you see that? It's rather beautiful.
Can, yeah.
It's been produced by Whitbread and Company, the brewers, and it's called Receipts and Relishes, and I believe it's 1950s, and it says in here 1950. And again, it goes back through these old recipes. So what you find is that local recipes go through the whole country. It's got little maps and stuff. And what you find is that things from Hampshire. I'm just going to have a look at the Sussex page as well. What we've got: Arundel mullets. We've got Ashdown partridge pudding. I've got Huckle my buff, which is an egg flip. And Lardy John, I always like small lard. If you've had a lardy cake, which is made from lard, Lardy Johns are the Sussex variation on that, which are smaller and easier to cook as well. And something called Sussex blanket pudding as well. So that's rather lovely. So these things go in cycles. You know, you've got this Victorian edge for local food, and then you've got this. Well, I've got this one from 1930s edge for local recipes. Goes back to the 50s. There's a bit of a resurgence now as well. So these things start coming back, and there was a thing with Bake Off, wasn't there? But they did the Sussex Pond pudding, so that sort of resurged again a few years ago. I love the way that things kind of come back, and we need them, don't we? At certain points, I think in history, they give us, I don't know, comfort, nostalgia, reassurance, especially, you know, in these days now, I think that people go back to the old things for a reason. So it's fascinating how history kind of comes back, you know.
It goes from cycles. So
in different ways. Recycles, exactly. It's recycling history and the recipes that go with it. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to go and find out about local food in their area and the history of local food in their area, what could they do to kind of start delving into the subject?
Well, I've got a few. I mean, I'll give you a few great books. There's also a really wonderful website called The Lost Foods of England. I've got the book of it. This is a really good starting point because he unfortunately he died about a year ago or so. But he was really, really busy with research. He's gone through newspapers and old recipe books and put it all together, sort of. And you can look regionally as well at the recipes as well. So it's really handy. There are lots of I've got the Sussex recipe book. I've got one from Hampshire. If you go on to, into your bookshop or look online, you can find these old pamphlets. This is Cooking in Hampshire, Past and Present, which is rather wonderful. So people have actually put all the recipes together for you. And then from there, you can go on. But I mean, the best thing also is just go to your local, the one we use is the Keep. And they have lots and lots of local recipes, lots of recipe books. You can actually, manuscript recipe books. There's original handwritten recipe books that you can look into yourself, which is fascinating.
Okay, so that's your local archives.
Local archive, yeah. Ours is the Keep in where it's Lewes, Sussex, yeah. Okay. Yeah, which is really wonderful. Yeah, great. And do take a cardigan because it's really cold. you know, probably, don't you? It's always cold.
I presume there's probably some on Internet Archive as well.
Everything, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use a lot of the Welcome collection's very good for that as well. They've got really good photos of all the books as well, so you can actually see the pages and flip through them. Really recommend. And it's all a bit hidden, but I really recommend the Welcome. It's just a lovely experience. You feel like you've got the book in front of you, on your screen. It's rather wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. So what do you think, what people were eating? What does that tell you about the people themselves?
Oh, good question. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the things that remembered, the things that are written down in these books as well. Often quite poor food as well, with quite poor ingredients. I don't know what it's a good question. What does it tell about people?
I was actually thinking about how different people eat, different things at different times. So what a labourer is eating might not be the same as what somebody who was, running a hotel might eat, or well, I'm sort of trying to think of somebody with a higher social class. Then the highest I could come up with was a hotel owner, which probably says something about my own limitations.
I mean, the problem we really do have, especially with all these records and recipes, is that food history is basically rich people's history. I mean, almost always there are scraps, and as you come down the time period, as you come to the Victorian period and onwards, you do get a lot more glimpses into what ordinary people are working. But the things, especially in the beginning, the things that people preserve are, you know, the best foods, the best banquets, you know, all of those things, the things that you want to show off and show people you're eating. If I look at my recipe book collection, you know, it's a lot about prestige food now, isn't it? If you think about Nigella, it's someone described it very much as it's easy food, but also food that you can show off with. And I think that's kind of what happens when people write things down. There's a few reasons people are keeping these recipes, aren't there? You know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, actually. I think that's a really good tip. It's something to remember when you are looking through, is actually who would have been reading these and who would have been using these recipes, and then how would these recipes have maybe like filtered down as well, where people are doing simpler and simpler. Because I know myself that I've read, like, you know, fancy recipes and thought, I can't afford some of those ingredients, but I bet if I did it with this, it would be similar, and that must be the same in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And do you get it sometimes? You get in the manuscript cookbooks, you do get people writing in and changing things as well, which I always think is the best thing. When you see a recipe and then you can see it being adapted by people. I think that's always quite fascinating as well. And I do it in my books. I mean, you start writing, don't you? I don't know if people use cookery books. I often use them as diaries. I just write down what I do on a particular day, and I can look back on that as well. And so you make your recipe your own. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay.
And obviously that happened in the past as well.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. That was really interesting. Whistle stop tour. Just accidentally clicked on something. So where can people find out more about you and you know, the food history that you delve into via cooking?
The best place is on my website. I think you're going to stick it up there, aren't you? Yeah, there we go. Oh, good. So that's www.paulcouchman.co.uk. I've got a website, and my next course, depending on when you listen or watch this, is on the 31st of Halloween. I'm doing it together with social historian Sarah Tobias, and we're doing Halloween. So we're doing things that are associated with funerals, but also things that are associated with Halloween and the traditions, and also the food traditions involved. So there's lots of things with apples and swedes and kale, actually, finding out your future husband through the method of pulling a kale plant up in the middle of the night. So
sold. I really enjoyed your Jane Austen picnic. So yeah.
Jane Austen picnic. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much, Paul, for joining us and for letting me interview you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.